Welcome everyone. We're going to start this cute little Christmas project. We're going to take our craftiness up a notch and do an intro to woodworking. It's a great starter project. I think anyone can do this. You'll need a few simple tools. We'll cover that. My name is Amber Seymour and I own Urban Timber Revival, and normally I do some larger artwork like you see here, but I love holiday projects. So let's get started. All right, so moving on to equipment, we're going to start off with some safety equipment. You always want to protect your ears, eyes, and lungs. So some earmuffs, face protection, eye protection. We're going to use a miter saw and a simple drill, and then just some craft supplies, whatever you have for paint. So we're going to use white paint today. I'm using some dark walnut stain. Any darker stain will do, and a rag and a simple brush. I prefer an angle brush for this project, but anything will really do. And for wood today, I'm using a 5-inch piece of white common board. Now, if I had leftover fencing or scrap, that would be fine too, just something that we can cut. So moving to our miter saw, we're going to keep this at 30 degrees and we're not going to move it. We're just going to let it sit there. So to make a perfect triangle is easier than you think. People always get frustrated with this, but we're going to make the first cut to that top corner. As you can see, I have that lined up, and then we're just going to flip that board over and cut to the upper corner again, and then you'll have a perfect triangle, and I will demonstrate this. Okay, so I had made that first cut just to discard that end piece, and now I'm flipping it over. I'm lining it up to that banding, and you could bring your blade down without actually cutting and see if you're lined up. But I ran out of battery life, so I moved to my big saw. So again, I set at 30 degrees. I'm going to discard that end piece right there. We don't need that. I'm going to flip it over, line it up to that top corner with my blade, and voila, we should have a triangle. So that was easy enough. We're going to keep flipping this board. Again, I'm not moving that blade. Flipping the board, make it easy. It will make sure that everything's uniform that way. Okay, so I'm just going to keep flipping this board and making a few more cuts, and then we'll have a whole stack of triangles that we can use. So now I'm taking all of those triangles and I'm drilling a hole on one corner only, and then we're going to come by and sand. So that little hole is for the ribbon later. So you want to make it big enough where you can get a ribbon through there, and we're sanding just enough to get rid of any splinters or take off any rough edges from the miter saw. If you have a nice blade with a lot of teeth in it, you shouldn't have a lot of rough edges, but there's always a little cleanup to do. All right, so I finished these up and I have a whole pile of triangles that have been drilled and sanded. And I have these scrap 2x2s I keep on hand. This is going to be my drying rack. Like, think of hot cookies out of the oven, how you have that rack. It just gives them room to breathe and it will aid in the drying process. So I sped this up. I'm just gonna finish staining every single one of these and we will move on to the next step. Okay, as you see here, I have all these on the drying rack, and just to be safe, I'm just going to let these sit overnight and make sure they get good and dry. You don't want that stain lifting through your paint later. All right, so we're moving on to painting now, and as you can see, I already have a few done on my desk here. So what I'm looking for is the top that has the hole drilled in it, and we're going to take an angled brush. If you don't have an angle, that's okay, just anything, and we're going to do a little squiggle. Honestly, I'm not that artistic, so a squiggle is what you're going to get from me. If you wanted to do something more jagged or realistic, you just paint it however you like it. So we're going to do both sides, and you can do the back if you like to. I just choose not to. So we're going to do this layer of paint, possibly one more, depending if you can see through this. So I kind of put it on pretty thick here. And then I'm going to take the other end of that paintbrush, and that's how I add my snow. Super easy little trick there. Now, speaking of the paint, I am using a paint I had down in the garage. It's both stain, it has a stain lifter blocker and a primer built in. So it kind of protects you from having any of that stain lift up through the paint. especially if you're using white. So if you're going to do a lot of crafts, you can just go pick this right off the shelf at any like Home Depot or Lowe's, a stain blocker with primer built in. If you work with wood a lot and worry about those tannins, it's worth the money. Okay, so we're going to speed this up a little bit. And then you'll see we have quite a few of these done. And you can tell, I'm going to move in close on here, that these will need a second little coat of paint. You can see some of that brown sticking through, but they're almost done. Okay, so now that we have all of these almost ready, we're going to grab some ribbon, twine, really whatever you have. And hopefully you drilled that hole big enough to get this through. So if you have trouble with it, just grab something skinny like a little, I have a little screwdriver here. I'm just going to force that through. And if you have trouble with these, I probably should have maybe used a little bit bigger of a drill bit. You kind of run the risk of splitting that top of the triangle though, so I would probably prefer to go small and have to force that twine in there rather than split the wood. Okay, so here we go. We're just going to do a simple knot. Kind of pull that tight so that it doesn't come off. I'm just going to trim that end off. And there we go. So cute. Okay, now that we've done this basic mountain, I'm going to show some bonus footage. So if you have a silhouette or a Cricut that prints stencils for you, I'm not going to go into that today, but if you have one, you can just make little stencils of your choosing and step these up a notch. So I'm just going to put these on here and I'm going to burnish it on real quick. So for those of you who don't know what a Cricut or silhouette is, it's an amazing tool that you can do like die cuts with, make your own stencils with, anything. And again, that's a whole separate class, but I know a lot of you have one. So I'm just going to kind of touch on how you can beef up these mountains with one today. And if you don't have access to one, a lot of times around the holidays, your craft store will have simple holiday stencils. So keep an eye out. Or if you're really handy and have a nice penmanship, just take a like a paint pen and you can paint a design on as well. Okay, so I'm going to get a few of these going and then we'll add some paint. All right, so I'm just going to do kind of a light touch on these. You want to make sure that the paint doesn't bleed through. So to do that, just don't put a whole bunch of paint on your brush. Just do a light little touch. If you need to come back over it a second time, you can. So I'll do that one. And my little PNW, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so that's why I chose to do that here. And if you're someone who has trouble with a lot of bleeding with your stencils, you could probably do a little spray of polyacrylic over here before you stencil. That might seal it in a little bit. That's kind of tough with stain. Okay, so I think I got some decent coverage here. And if it looks a little rustic and it's not 100%, I would rather have that than have my paint bleed. So again, a light little touch. Okay, we're going to speed this up. So you can see I'm kind of doing half Joy, half PNW. I'm weeding out the rest of that stencil. And then I'm adding all the polka dots again. So this just gives a nice regional touch or personal touch to like gifts or local holiday shows if you do them. Just personalize them how you like. So I waited for the paint to dry and added ribbon and we are done. I hope you enjoyed this Christmas craft, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and that will enable me to keep adding classes in the future. Thank you.